What is going on, everybody? Thank you all so much for tuning in to another episode of Mikasa Sukasa, and I am your host, Niko House. I hope that you all are having a great day. This is our daily podcast, and I actually wanted to share a interview that I did with Garland Nixon and Lee Stranahan. They have a show called Fault Lines in Washington, D.C. It's a radio show. You can find them on Twitter. I don't know Garland's. I know Stranahan. You just literally go at Stranahan. His name is Lee Stranahan. And Garland Nixon, I do know, is on Facebook. You can follow him there. But it's a very unique format for a show. It is a very authentic one, I would say. So Lee Stranahan is a Republican conservative who is a Trump supporter. However, he did used to be a Democrat. It was really very recently that he became a Republican. And for Garland is a progressive. He is a Democrat, which he does not like. He does not like what the Democrats do. And oftentimes when he says he's Democrat, he says it under his breath because they're not in an open primary state. So, like I said, it's a very unique format for a show. They seem to get along very well. It's all very organic. It isn't like, yelling back and forth at each other where you would think they dislike each other because of their ideologies and they would just disagree on everything that came out of each other's mouth. And it's not the case. It's actually different. When I went on the show this morning, it looked like they agreed on mostly everything. I'm going to be honest with you. So that it was pretty cool to be on the show. And I just wanted to go over and expound upon some of the things that we discussed. And eventually I will have them on my show, probably one at a time. And then, which I'm pretty excited about because they're both really smart guys. So on the show, Garland discussed what the Democratic Party used to be like in regards to how they were the ones who were crying out for free speech, how they were very anti-deep state, anti-CIA, anti-FBI. If you all recall, JFK gave a speech condemning these very things. This shadow government, like the behavior we've seen within the FBI as of late. JFK was not a supporter of that. However, at that time, the conservatives were overwhelmingly in favor of hyper-surveillance, right? Clearly, that is a tradition that has, I wouldn't say it's changed. So now the Republicans are about hyper-surveillance, and so are the Democrats. So they're both bought off. But Garland was just referring to that time period and saying it's so different now because they seem to be the ones guarding and protecting the deep state. And that is, that's so true, right? Yeah, the Koch brothers are all out in the open, and we all know that the Republicans get a lot of their money from the Koch brothers. However, what is not talked about on the left is Soros, right? Soros, he is the gatekeeper on the deep state left. In other words, he has all of his money in all of the progressive or liberal activism groups, nonprofits, and all that good stuff. If you all remember, I did an episode maybe 4 or 5 days ago discussing how politics in the federal government itself is very similar to the stock market or a corporation. And what George Soros does by putting a lot of money not only into his politicians but also into the nonprofits and the activism groups is he's buying stock. He is not putting all that money in those particular groups for no reason. He's buying influence. He's buying influence in the left. Of course, this isn't limited to George Soros, but that's the biggest problem on the left. Very similar to how the right, their biggest contributors are the Koch brothers. Same scenario. They're buying stock, which is another way of saying they're buying influence. And so I was glad that Garland actually brought that point up, which is that it's almost like the Democrats shouldn't even be surprised at this point that they're losing so many people in their party. More and more are dropping off every day, I would say. The estimates for after the Democrats cheated Bernie Sanders, this is before they even competed in the general election. Once they cheated Bernie Sanders, 90 million people left the Democratic Party, and millions more stayed merely to not have their votes or their voter registration affected right before the general election came up. So that's pretty much the only thing that stopped many people from switching. So there are millions of people that were affected by that. So I mean, you're talking anywhere from between 20 and 25 million people left the Democratic Party, and the Democrats should honestly just not be surprised. Eventually, we were going to figure out that you're not who you say you are. Now, of course, this is a broad brush we're painting with. We know that there are exceptions to the rule when it comes to Democrats, but that it should go without being said because there are exceptions to the rules in regards to how Republicans vote and how they take care of their constituency. So my point is, though, that the Democrats really should, if you want any chance of being competitive again, you need to go back to being the party that made you so popular, being the party of free speech, being the party that actually supported the Constitution, even if it went against your personal interests, which many Democrats, ex-Democrats or what would have been called back in the day Republican, Abraham Lincoln was not as, he was not as tolerant as many would think, okay? He wasn't as welcoming to the black community as many would think. However, he was a constitutionalist. He was a person who knew that the Union needed to survive and could not be split up over something as stupid and really nonsensical and something that was such an economic burden to the rest of the country as slavery. He understood that, these are... the law is the law, whether or not I like it. And that's something that I actually can respect. I don't have to like somebody to make sure that the law is still followed to the letter, especially in situations like with Abraham Lincoln and then JFK during the Civil Rights Movement and things like that. And granted, Lyndon B. Johnson was the one who ended up signing in those amendments, but don't be fooled, people. He was not progressive. He was not a leftist. He did that so that he can continue the popularity that JFK had, which ultimately ended up failing him. But we also discussed on the show, because they asked me, how did I end up in the position that I was in as far as what my political beliefs are, and I was explaining that I've never actually registered for a party, ever. I've never been a registered Democrat, I've never been a registered Republican. It became very evident to me very, very early that, both parties suck. And they don't really offer anything different. Whenever someone would try to convince me to come into the Republican Party, it was, they would all just talk shit about the Democrats. That was them Democrats. Okay. And then somehow, because this is back in the day, before we had Obama, it always turned into, well, look at what Bill Clinton did and how they let him do that. Monica Lewinsky always got brought up somehow, some way. It's pretty amazing. It's almost like they were jealous of pimping Clinton, now that I'm starting to think about it. Oh, man. So, it's, the Democrats, however, would do the same thing. It was always, we hate Bush. Once again, this is not that long ago, but for me, it felt like a long time ago. But throughout, in my entire junior year in high school, and in junior high school, and then all of my years in high school, was a Bush administration. So everything was really surrounded by, who could dislike Bush the most. That was the common theme of the Democratic Party. And I didn't like Bush, but that wasn't going to be enough reason to push me into your party. And then the Republicans began to win me over a little bit with the fiscal conservatism argument. And then I looked at the actual party itself and the idea of a small government. Mind you, I was in high school at the time, so I wasn't fully. And I went to high school in the South, so they don't really emphasize the parts of history that you probably should get emphasized. But fiscal conservatism was something that was preached but was rarely practiced. It seemed like there was only fiscal conservatism whenever they were having conversations about who to not help, who they had the right to not help. Okay. However, when it comes to militarism, the Republican Party spends almost more than anybody else. Republican presidents outspend, as far as military is concerned, in accounting for inflation. They outspend the Democrats by a lot. In fact, it was the Democrats who used to be considered the isolationists, and then the Republicans were the war hawks, and then it kind of switched. And then I think it's pretty even now, right? It's pretty even now. But I never really had the real life experience to put the statistics with reality. So it was they kind of convinced me that, yeah, in practice, this works out a lot better. Hell, in theory, it even works out great. But in reality, when do you see the Republican Party actually exercise fiscal conservatism? They expanded the military budget this year by, $700 million or something to that extent? I mean, the Republican states truly have more people on welfare than most of the country. I mean, they don't practice conservatism in the way that they pretend they do. I mean, this is also the party who gets paid to consume fossil fuels and gets paid to pretend like they don't know that there could be damage to the environment. They get paid to deny science. I'm not really trying to have a climate change discussion, but I'm just saying they vote the way they vote because they're paid to. So all the idea of fiscal conservatism, it sounds great. The idea of big government or small government sounds great until you look at their records. They want to legislate what you can and can't do as far as marijuana. They want to legislate what you can and can't do as far as being able to take, if your uterus is your uterus. I personally, if it's at all possible, I would like to prevent abortion, but I'm also an activist and a realist, and if I'm not the person that has to make that ultimate decision, I would like to be included with it, but it's not my uterus. I'm not going to be the one who is totally. As a mother, it's not the same experience, people. That is your responsibility. You can't just leave. I mean, and when they do, it's. If you ever seen a mother away from their child that they take care of every day for more than a week for the first time, they go crazy. So imagine trying to give your child up. Imagine being the one responsible for the death of something that's in your body. It was your choice whether or not that thing would die. So that's not my place. But the Republican Party wants to legislate someone else's body, but they're the same ones who complain if anyone even attempts to legislate how the elite spend their money. So in the idea of being pro-life, you got to be, if you're going to be pro-life, you can't say when people get here, hey, we're not going to help you out if you slip at some point. You got to be pro-life all the way. So both parties lie. And I found that out really, really fast. And as I got older, people tried to push me and get me to run for a Democrat in particular areas and as a Republican. And people have tried to get me to bash black people or some of the stereotypes that are attached to black people. And some people have tried to get me to bash white people and some of the stereotypes that are attached to white people. And nobody really tries to understand each other, which is something that Stranahan brought up. Lee said that one of the biggest things, or I think it was Lee, well, it was one of them, or both of them brought it up and talked about it a little bit, but communication is being shut down. It was Lee, actually. Yeah, it was him. But communication is being shut down. The moment you share an article that someone doesn't agree with, and it's not from a website that they would consider representative of their political ideology, it's automatically fake news. Automatically, it's oh, that's fake. Oh, you got that from Fox News. Oh, you got that from Washington Post. I posted an article from Fox News one time, and the article was actually just another article from an independent news source that was being quoted in Fox News because Fox News didn't feel like typing it up, and they gave credit to that person. But the facts were true and accurate. It wasn't like an opinion piece. So this person tricked themselves out of reading it without even trying to figure out what the article was about. That's shutting down conversation. That's what this Russiagate narrative does. It's intended to shut down conversations. It's the if you're not with us, you're against us conversation. I was telling them about how the Democrats and the Republicans, but specifically right now, the Democrats, every time they accuse somebody of something, you can be damn sure that they probably did it themselves already. And as Garland pointed out, which I didn't know a lot of people knew, it is Machiavellian. It's straight out of The Prince. Whatever you are guilty of, accuse the other person of doing. And then when that happens, you muddy the waters, because now you're arguing over integrity versus getting to the substantive discussion of policies and how to move forward and finding something you agree on. So if you don't believe in that person, if you don't find that person credible, why would you have a serious conversation about their opinion or what they think about the situation? Curiously enough, the communication is what we have thrived upon in the political world. The communication aspect is really what has driven our movement forward since the 2016 election. Well, because before, very recently, there was a serious lack of communication, and there was lack of access to communication. Bernie Sanders would not have been able to run the campaign, nor would Trump have been able to run the campaign he ran, if social media had not become more prominent, if we had not grown used to interacting with people that we did not know, right? Becoming more open to different experiences, different ideas, different opinions. It was that communication that has really forged some of the coalitions that we have today, but also, unfortunately, it's that communication or lack thereof that has forced these coalitions to take sides, kind of pitting groups against each other once again on a different medium. Because, once again, all sides try to prevent communication. They all try to dehumanize the other group that doesn't agree with them, to delegitimize them. And I don't know what could possibly change that outside of opening up more lines of communication. And I think a lot of people have. That's one thing I love about this particular show, is that you have a Democrat and a Republican on the show, and they generally agree about the same things as far as the root causes for the situation that we're living in right now politically. I'd be curious to know how many people could sit across from somebody that they disagree with every day and do a show with them. And I'm sure some of those conversations get pretty heated. But I also talked about the Russiagate situation with Bernie Sanders and telling him, like, look, I understand from a strategic standpoint where he thought that might have gotten him in the very beginning. Okay? But that's not the situation that we're in right now. The people who hate him are going to hate him. The neoliberals, I mean, think about it. If he's literally done everything that they've needed him to do in the public eye, as far as condemning Russia, which he shouldn't have, condemning Syria, which he shouldn't have, perpetuating any of those nonsensical neoliberal foreign policy narratives. Hell, even buying into the whole protection of James Comey and the FBI bullshit. But they still don't like him. He's bought into all of that. They still don't like him. So why, at that point, would you continue to try and bring people over that you can't win over? What you need to be worrying about Bernie Sanders is, once again, get the people who are pissed at you back in your party, or back in your favor, or in their favor. Make sure that you don't piss the ones who still believe in you off. Now, how do you do that? You piss them off by perpetuating these nonsense narratives, peddling bullshit that has been totally unproven, or as James Comey said in his testimony, unverified and salacious. We can go all day for why Bernie Sanders needs to stop, but the real, like, if you want to just get down to the nitty gritty of it, it's strategy. It's poor strategy, and that reason alone should be enough to make him or whoever is in charge of this, his talking points, step back and say, look, this isn't going to work. I understand we want to beat Trump, but we need to get past the primary first. We don't need to give these people, these neoliberals, any excuses whatsoever to screw you over again. So that was pretty much everything that we discussed on the show. Like I said, I can't wait to have them on my show. I can't wait to go back on theirs. It was a really good conversation. Definitely, if you're on Twitter, I pinned it to the top of my profile, so go check it out if you want to hear it. And go follow them if you are on Twitter. Like I said, they'll be tagged in the actual video itself. So thank you all so much for listening. Make sure that you go follow us on Twitter at NikoCFSB. College students for Bernie. That's what that stands for. Somebody asked me that before. And then make sure you follow me on Facebook, Niko D House. Make sure you check out my Medium articles as well. You can find those at medium.com and just type in Niko House and my profile should come up. You'll see all those neat articles that I wrote. If you're on YouTube, you can also click on the link in the description. So, with that being said, people, always remember, find your balance. Peace.